So in the last video, we're being encouraged to examine our essential situation, our existential situation. We're being asked not to take for granted the fact that we are here experiencing this. We tend to ignore the fact of our situation and just get on with what we believe we should be getting on with. So there's a process of inquiry going on here. And if you haven't listened to the previous video, video 136, then it might be an idea to do so before this one. Verse 215. Why is birth spoken of? Why is not the perceived world spoken of? The perceived world, which has no existence, is yet perceived as existing. What is that which is spoken of? To whom is it, and why? So the word birth is often used, and in verse 213, the translator, Professor Suzuki, suggested that it's the birth of realities. This sounds a bit abstract, a bit mystical. But this is what we're doing all the time. Whatever we experience, we regard as real. So the reality of you listening to this right now is what you take as real, along with the context, of course, in which you're listening to it. So this is what was being explored in the previous video. And I suppose it's quite contentious, because it's saying that it's the perceiver that gives rise to reality. Now the assumption, and it doesn't matter whether you're religious or not, it's the assumption of the scientist is that there's a world out there. There's a world out there that is being perceived. This isn't something that is being made up here. It's out there. There's a common consensus. You're experiencing the same world as I experience. Well, that's the assumption. The reality is, if we got together and had a talk about it, we might have a lot of disagreements about the nature of the world. We might think it's a rather awful place, or we might think it's a rather wonderful place. Life is great. Life is hell. Life's about exploitation. It's about opportunity. It's about evolution. It's about dog eat dog. It's about helping others. It's a miserable state of affairs. It makes me want to write beautiful poetry. So it goes on. It's the same world we're talking about, but everybody responds to it in a different way, in accordance with what was described previously as their habit energy, or their pattern of moods. But even though we've all got a different opinion about it, we'd all say, yes, but it's the same world. So that's what this verse is addressing, this understanding that, yes, there is an objective world out there which we're all experiencing, but we're all experiencing it in different ways. That's a conventional understanding. So why is not the perceived world spoken of? It's this assumption that there's a perceived world, an objective world, that is being challenged in this text, in these teachings, in these videos. So now it actually looks at this assumption that there is a perceived world, not an objective world out there. And the perceived world, which has no existence, is yet perceived as existing. What is that which is spoken of? To whom is it, and why? Okay, let's assume there is an objective world out there that is being perceived. it states, first of all, the perspective of these teachings, which is that it has no existence, yet it's perceived as existing. So what is it? What is this perceived world then? Well, this is the question that the scientists, the physicists seek to answer. And they come up with their mathematical theories. It can only be described by mathematics. I actually used to be a mathematics teacher. There's a certain curriculum I had to deliver. And the problem was a lot of children couldn't connect with it. Why are we learning this? What use is this to me? Well, I suppose I could have told them it's the language of reality, according to the physicists. Maybe some of them would be impressed by that, but it's not really going to help them with their struggle to comprehend simultaneous equations. And it seems to be a problem that persists to this day in the teaching of mathematics. Kids can't relate to it, even though it's the language of objective reality. But maybe they're right. Maybe the scientists are wrong. The thing about mathematics is you cannot argue with it. You can only take it further. You can only hop on board and take it further, develop it, refine it, and in doing so take it further and further and further away from our own experience. But then again, there are some who will argue that mathematics is actually an invention of the mind. But the problem is, it's not just in asserting the objective nature, the objective reality of mathematics, it's a denying of our own subjective experience. The physicists will tell us that what we're experiencing is not real. So that sounds familiar enough. But it's actually denying the reality of our senses. Because all it's saying is that our senses only give us a model of reality. In fact, that's all that mathematics gives us as well, a model of reality. So the senses are what are technically called transducers. They convert one form of energy into another. And the thing is, what the senses do, they convert, according to the story, they convert everything into electricity. So touch is about sending physical resistance in the form of electrical impulse to the brain, whereby it's understood as touch. Same with sight. Chemical reactions in the back of the eye produce electrical signals. It's the same with all the other senses. So according to science, all we're experiencing is electricity. Electrical signals. That is it. That is it. Everything we experience is electrical signals. And these electrical signals are somehow transformed by this thing called the brain, which we can't directly know about because all we can directly know is electrical signals, remember. But there seems to be something which transforms all these electrical signals into our total experience. What an incredible story. And it's not just that. The assumption is that these electrical signals that are being experienced in here are given as a model of what's being experienced out there. But the thing is, to whom is it? We're asked, to whom is it? What is this model being presented to? Because the scientific description has just assumed that we're like some kind of robotic mechanism like a camera. A camera receives images. It captures images. Right? But there's nothing in the camera accepting that image. The image isn't being presented to anybody or anything. But there's something in here which doesn't seem to be part of the scientific picture, which is having that image presented to it. How does that fit in to the understanding then, to the picture? Who is in receipt of this model? What is in receipt of this model which is being constructed from electrical signals? The scientific story is actually so bizarre, so full of leaps of faith, that it's a wonder that any rational person holds on to it. And the question that arises is, and why? Not quite sure what we're asking why about here, but I would ask, why are we buying into this story? Because the scientists say so, and because scientists give us technology and technology works. So we have to respect the technology, and because we respect the fact that technology works, we have to respect what the scientists say about reality. Not at all, not at all. Doesn't follow at all. Good model makers are good model makers, and that's that. We can respect their craft, but we don't have to listen to what they have to say about reality, especially when it's so full of non sequiturs, and even more especially when it denies, when it alienates us from our own essential experiencing. So the previous verses in the previous video were asking us to examine our situation, and these verses here are criticizing the conventional understanding, and the next verses give us an alternative way of looking at things.